Good morning, church. The day is just too beautiful to be inside. I wonder if the same verse in our gospel lesson caught your eye and imagination the way it did mine. Jesus in the parable implores two sons to go and work in the vineyard today. The first son says yes and then never goes. The second son said no and then goes and does the work in the vineyard. We are asked to consider which one did the will of his father. It's a rhetorical question because the answer is ripe for the picking. The second son did the will of the father because the second son worked in the vineyard. When I think of God's vineyard today, I see a lot of work to be done. Just recently, we had our folks working in the vineyard, distributing food to the neighborhood through our food pantry and passing out needed items for the hungry and homeless at St. Paul on Huffman Avenue. While that work was accomplished, that was just the work as you step into the vineyard. There is still the back 40 with lots of work still to do. Jesus said, "Go and work in the vineyard today." There is work to do to stop human trafficking. There is work to do to provide safety to immigrants and refugees. There is work to do to provide affordable housing to seniors. There is work to do to end homelessness and offer mental health services to veterans and all who suffer. There is work to do to provide basic health care to billions of people across the world. There is work to do in mentoring and after-school programs. You get the point. There is work to do in the vineyard, and Jesus calls us to actively, creatively, and enthusiastically go. This morning, I want to simply share one person who heard Jesus imploring him to go to work in the vineyard, and he went. He was a man who went to work in the vineyard to bring about justice in the South where Jim Crow ruled. I will share a truncated version of his life and work, but I share a bit of it in his life and work because his work in the vineyard gives me hope and inspires me to continue the work he risked his life to accomplish. His name was Robert Gretz. He died this past Sunday, September 20th, at the age of 92. Robert was a Lutheran pastor. He grew up in West Virginia, but came to Ohio for his college and seminary education. He graduated from my alma mater, Capital University, in 1950, and then in seminary, he went and graduated from a predecessor body of what is currently now Trinity Seminary in Columbus. When he graduated seminary in 1954, his first call was to Trinity Lutheran Church in Montgomery, Alabama. He was a white pastor to an all-black congregation. Rosa Parks, who was the president of the local NAACP chapter, would often come and give talks at his church. They were friends. It wasn't too long after he was in Montgomery when Rosa Parks was arrested and the bus boycott began in 1955. Pastor Gretz was a vocal and active supporter of the boycott and took his place right alongside Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He invited other white clergy in Montgomery to join him and stand up to support their black brothers and sisters, and none of them did. They did not want to take the risk of working in that dangerous section of the vineyard. But Pastor Gretz jumped right in and got to work in the vineyard. He spent part of every day, hours every day, driving black men and women to work. Since they would not take the bus to work, they either had to get a ride or they had to walk, and he gave thousands of rides during that year. He was continually warned by the KKK to cease and desist his support of the boycott. He did not listen. The KKK bombed his home twice, one bomb blowing out the glass of his front window with his newborn child and wife inside. Along the way, Pastor Gretz was arrested and his family received constant death threats. But through it all, he and his wife Janine were stalwart in their support of the civil rights movement. This was their vineyard work. They never stopped working in the vineyard of God's kingdom. Recently, the dean of Trinity Seminary shared a text that was important to them. It's Acts 8:26. It goes like this. Then an angel of the Lord said to Philip, "Get up and go towards the south." This comes from the story of Philip's encounter with an Ethiopian believer. Like Philip, Pastor Gretz responded to God's call to get up and go to the south. What he experienced in the south transformed him, and here are his own words. Arriving here, he said, I realized I had no idea what it would be like to be black and live in daily repression. I had no idea what it would be like to be told day after day and year after year that you are a nobody, that you have no value. I cannot minister to souls alone. My people also have bodies. The Dean of Trinity continued by sharing, one might say that Pastor Gretz knew deep in his bones that Black Lives Matter long before that became the name of a movement. Later, the Gretzes returned to Columbus, Ohio, where Pastor Gretz served St. Philip's Lutheran Church from 1958 to 1967. At one point in his long pastoral service, Gretz worked in Washington, D.C. as a lobbyist for marginalized individuals and groups. In 2007, the Gretzes retired to Montgomery, the community that had such a formative influence on them. When he was sent down to Montgomery by his Lutheran bishop, the bishop and other Lutheran higher-ups were worried that Gretz might become involved in the radical and racial unrest in Montgomery. His wife has shared in a later interview that those who sent him told him not to start trouble. He didn't, she said. He just joined the trouble already there. Go and work in the vineyard today. He did. 65 years after the beginning of the Montgomery bus boycott, laws have changed, but personal and structural racism continue to inflict deadly wounds on black and brown people and communities and upon the fabric of our whole society. There is vineyard work yet to be done. Pastor Robert Gretz now rests in peace. May his example inspire all of us not to rest, but rather to stand up, step forward, and act for justice. Jesus invites and implores, go and work in the vineyard today. Dr. Martin King Jr. recalled that Gretz served to remind those who were boycotting that many white people, as well as Negroes, were applying the love thy neighbor as thyself teaching of Christianity in their daily lives. May we all be inspired by this vineyard worker to apply the love thy neighbor teaching in the vineyard work that we are called to do in our daily living. Go and work in the vineyard today. Amen.